Everyone, it's Mariners Fanatic, and today I will be discussing the Kevin Mather controversy, his firing, and the drama surrounding it. I'm not going to go over all the comments he made. I will talk about what I feel is the most important pieces to those conversations that he had and the comments that he made. I watched the full interview last night. If you go to True to the Trident's page, they should have it on there. If you can't find it, it's an unlisted video, so you'll have to find a link for it. But it should be linked in their most recent video. So go check them out on YouTube, True to the Trident. And then Mariners Trident on Instagram, he helped me out with getting a lot of the screenshots and comments that players made and the comments that Kevin Mather made himself. So I want to thank him for that. In general, the comments that Kevin Mather made were irresponsible and not professional. I'm not exactly sure of his relationship with the Bellevue Rotary Club and what they do for the Seattle Mariners. I don't really feel like taking the time to look into that. But I thought it was very odd how candid he was with them. It was a long interview. He talked about a lot of things. I'm sure they have some sort of pull as far as funding Mariners stuff somehow, and that's why he was talking to them. But even then, it's like I'm not really sure the purpose of a lot of the stuff he was talking about. I'm sure obviously some of them are Mariners fans and they're excited about the season, but I don't think that necessarily gives him the right to say some of the things that he was talking about. Like I said, this was a very candid interview slash conversation, and some of the things that he said were very odd to me. So, kind of the first thing he talked about was how they did financially in 2020. And he said it was tough, but that they did better than most. And he really emphasized that, which is good to hear. But then it's also like, okay, so why couldn't we sign Paxton and Walker? And I'll talk about that later on in the video as he commented on that. It seems like they actually made money last year. I don't know for sure, but it seems like the Mariners did fairly well. And he talked about them being lucky and just kind of laughing about that. The whole vibe seemed very unprofessional to me with how he was talking about things. But it is good to hear that they're doing okay financially. During this section, he also talked about their TV deal with Root Sports and how they're making more than they should be, which I thought that was odd. Why would you admit to making more money on a TV deal than you should be? I thought that was very, very odd. I don't know why you would bring that up. And then he also talks about how he's disappointed that the season was starting on time and then he has concerns with the union next year and the new CBA coming up, which is interesting because we'll talk about his comments on kelenic and service time manipulation, but he basically adds flames to the fire going into those negotiations next year. The union's going to look at this and say, okay, there's obviously service manipulation going on. One of your former owners talks about it openly in an interview, and they're going to bring that to the table now. So it's funny how he's talking about this, and yet he just fanned the flames for it. This was also kind of a throwaway comment towards the end of the interview, but he talks about electronic strike zones coming to the MLB in the next couple of years. I'm not going to get into that too much, but I think that's very interesting. And then, kind of the last housekeeping thing I want to talk about is the relationship with the Aqua Sox. He discusses the minor league affiliates, and he talks about how Everett's facilities are not very good and the field's not very good. Which that's in this whole interview, that's probably the most true thing, most standard thing he could have said because I have played on that field. I have gone to games at Everett Memorial Stadium for years, and it is not a good field. The outfield is sand. It's horrible. They've tried to fix some things, but ultimately they haven't really done enough or very much. And Everett needs to step it up. As it's really beneficial to have Everett as Seattle's affiliate because they're a single A team where guys can go to rehab. You know, your younger prospects can go there starting out or within their first couple years, and you can get a good look at them without having to travel to Arizona or do different things. And they really need to keep a good relationship with Everett. Part of it's on Everett because they need to fix the facilities and make it so that that stadium, the training room, and hitting stuff, all that is good. But he does talk about having a good relationship with the owner, so hopefully we'll see some changes there soon. So that's pretty much it for the housekeeping topics I wanted to bring up. Now I'm gonna move into more of kind of the comments on players and a bit of more of the drama. So first off, getting back to the service time manipulation topic, this is probably the biggest point. He fans the Flames on it, which will probably be brought up at the CBA talks next year. How a lot of owners are very happy about him making these comments. Which again, even if you have these thoughts, why you're talking about them on a recorded interview slash video, I I'm not really sure why you do that, but I'll move on. He talks about how you weren't going to see any of the young prospects last year, no matter what happened with COVID. It's an egregious comment, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot you can say about that because it's like, would you want to rush Kelenic? Not really, personally. Would you want to rush Cal Raleigh? No. But at the same time, to just straight up say, oh yeah, they weren't going to play anyways, is kind of disrespectful to them because Kelenic was working really hard last year. So in general, it's just not a great comment. And also talking about Kelenic is he talks a lot. He mentions it multiple times in the interview about how he's a very confident young man, which from what I've seen from Kelenic, he is very confident. He does seem a little bit cocky. He reminds me a little bit of Bryce Harper. I don't think he's going to be a jerk or anything like that. Not that Bryce Harper's a jerk now, but he was when he was a younger player a little bit. I like Kelenic, but he does seem like he's a little bit cocky. I guess he was under the impression that he was supposed to be up with the big club last year. Personally, I don't really agree with that. He doesn't have much time under his belt, and some people could argue with me. It's like, oh, well, if he is like Bryce Harper, who was 19 when he came up, or Juan Soto, then let him come up. And I agree with that point, and so that's why I think he should be on the starting roster for this year. But just last year, he's still 19. It was a weird season. No need to bring him up and introduce him to big league pitching and possibly wreck his confidence last year. Whereas this year, with a full spring and a full season, I definitely think he should be the starting left fielder. I don't know if that'll happen. Jerry DePoto's comments lead me to believe that may not be the case. He'll probably still come up later, but we'll see what happens. In general, his comments about Kelenic are not great, but I also think Kelenic holds himself to a high standard of the opinion that he should have been up already, which I don't necessarily agree with. He also talks about how they offered Kelenic similar contract to Evan White, and Kelenic is betting on himself and turned that deal down, which I think he should. I don't think he should sign a long-term deal yet. I think he should bet on himself. And if he does and he doesn't do well, then the Mariners are not strung up with a contract there. The difference between Kelenic and Evan White is Evan White, his defense is incredible on its own. He could hit 220 and his defense would still be extremely valuable. Not to say that Kelenic doesn't have good defense, but his draw is his hitting. So they're just different players, and I don't think that contract would have made sense for Kelenic. He also talks about other players possibly extending. He doesn't spend too much time on who that would be potentially, but he mentions there's a few players who might be interested in that and who they might pursue that with. So we'll see what happens there. He talks about Gilbert, who's not coming up yet. I'm sure Gilbert is probably frustrated as well that he's not up. But personally, I don't know if I want him up just yet. I don't think Gilbert quite has the star power factor as Kelenic does. And our rotation, though it's not like top tier, is pretty set. He would be competing with Justin Dunn, Chris Flexen, maybe even for that 5-6 spot in the rotation. There's not as much need for Gilbert to come up right away. He also talks about Taylor Trammell. Made some interesting comments about him. When he first saw him, he thought he was on the wrong field and that he should be at the Seahawks practice. I'm not going to say it's racist, but it seems like a little bit of profiling. It was kind of an odd comment. We got to be really careful right now because we really want, African American players to play baseball. Like we want more African American players in baseball. Saying something like that, where you're in the wrong sport, kind of maybe alluding to that. I don't think that's really a good look, especially in this day and age. So that was interesting comment that he brought that up. Also talking about Cal Raleigh and his service time stuff and how Luis Torrens is potentially blocking him and all that. That was a bit of a mess. He called Torres or whatever he said. He didn't even call him by the right name. So that's a little interesting. I'm sure it was just a slip of the tongue, and he does actually know his name. But that was a weird kind of series of comments talking about the young prospects, which makes me feel like, okay, are you really as involved as you should be, or are you involved and you're just out of touch? I don't know. It was a weird series of answers and talking about the prospects. Also, he talks about Julio Rodriguez, who won't be up till at least 22, which I think is fair. He's coming off an injury, and so I think him coming up in 22 is totally fair. We have Mitch Haniger still, Kyle Lewis, and if Kelenic comes up, he'll be in left. Mitch Haniger, I hope he does well. I really do. But his time with Seattle is dwindling, depending on his performance with how many injuries he's had. I think the comments about Julio coming up in 22 are valid. Where I have a problem with is him talking about Julio's English, which, if you've watched any of the Vibin' with J-Rod videos on the Mariners YouTube channel, for a young guy to come from a different country, his English is good. Like, obviously, it's not amazing, but like, why are you expecting that from a 19-year-old? So the comments about Julio's English were just nobody prompted it. Like, he just brought it up, and it was really, really weird. I don't know why he decided to go that route, making those comments. Also, talking about Iwakuma and his English, that was just very tone deaf. I don't know why he would bring that up, talking about Iwakuma like that, a guy who's been with us forever, and $75,000 a year for a translator who is with your team all the time, doing a lot of different things. And he talks about how Iwakuma helps with scouting. And, I mean, it's like the Mariners have one of the biggest presence in that Eastern market in Asia. Why would you risk that by making comments about their language? Like, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know how much translators get paid, but it seems like for a guy who might be working with a lot of different players, it doesn't seem like that much, especially for a baseball team that's raking in a lot of money. In general, I just think those comments were unfounded, and it was odd to talk about that. He also made some backhanded compliments, like he praises Gonzalez in the first sentence, and then the next sentence he calls him boring. I thought that was really strange. I don't know why you would ever call somebody boring in a professional sense, and that's my biggest problem with this whole thing is maybe you think somebody is boring, but you're not going to say it in an interview or in a professional setting when you're in such a high position of leadership in a sports team or in any job. Why would you make those comments? It's just very, very odd to me. He also talks about Kyle Seagar, same thing, backhanded compliment about how, oh, he'll be in the Mariners Hall of Fame as soon as he's done playing, but he's overpaid, which he really isn't overpaid. He struggled here and there over the past couple years, but last year was a good year for him, and he had the injuries like back in 2019, so he really has not been overpaid, and I thought those comments were kind of ridiculous. And the last thing I want to talk about is how he talks about Paxton and Taijuan Walker situation. He kind of alludes to the fact that ownership was playing this, oh, if we just wait them out, they'll come to us kind of thing, which was the case in Paxton's scenario. And, that's good. I was surprised that we got Paxton, but I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that Paxton's price range would be a little bit higher than what the Mariners were willing to pay, and it seems that Paxton came down a little bit. So it worked out for us. I don't know if he straight up told Taijuan Walker he wouldn't get a 3-year deal, but in my opinion, Walker deserves a 3-year deal, and he got that. He got 2 years guaranteed with a third-year option with the Mets. And, he's probably really happy with that, and he should be, and I'm happy for him. There wasn't much reason not to get Walker. Think of that rotation. Marco Gonzalez, James Paxton, Taijuan Walker, Justice Sheffield, Yusei Kikuchi, and then Chris Flexen or Justin Dunn for the sixth spot. That's a pretty solid rotation and puts us in better contention with the AL West. It's probably not likely that we will see Taijuan Walker back in a Mariners uniform even after his most recent deal with the Mets in a few years. And that's, it's a little disappointing. I really liked Walker. I thought we should have got him. But anyways, to kind of end this discussion, rant, overall, I thought his comments were very unprofessional. A lot of them were blunt and kind of speaking on his own terms. Even though John Stanton made a statement, I'm not totally convinced that service time manipulation was probably discussed between the owners and president, Jerry and all those guys. I'm not totally convinced that they didn't have those discussions. So even though Kevin Mather's comments don't represent the organization as a whole, some of the things I think were on the table, and that's why maybe Mather felt comfortable sharing them. Ultimately, Kevin Mather has had stuff in the past too, with I guess some sexual misconduct stuff in the office back in 2018 and 2016 as well. I think he's had issues, and so he kind of needed to go. It's just frustrating because I do not want to see the Mariners fail because of ownership. If we're going to fail, let it be because the talent just doesn't come around or whatever. But this team, if you think about this team, we've had Felix Hernandez, Ichiro, Ken Griffey Jr., Alex Rodriguez, Edgar Martinez, Randy Johnson, Tino Martinez, Mike Cameron. Like, we've had so many incredible players in our history. It's never been a lack of talent for why the Mariners have struggled. It's been because of coaching and front office. And yes, in some regard, the talent falls into that. But there have been so many bad moves by ownership, especially over the last 20 years, where at some point, yes, it's on the players, but then at some point it's not. And if the Mariners fail over these next few years, it is totally on ownership. I don't think it's going to be on the players because Jerry has set this thing up to work, building a farm system and bringing in guys who can help us. And if the prospects don't hit, they don't hit. But if the prospects hit and we're still not successful, then something else is going on and ownership needs to be reevaluated. Because we cannot have another 90s situation where we have the best player in baseball and we can't make the playoffs every year. Well, that's true even of the 2000s with Ichiro and Felix Hernandez. Best pitcher in baseball for a couple years. Ichiro, best player for a couple years. We can't have that happen again. We need to be able to build a good team, and Kevin Mather's comments are slightly disturbing for what ownership, because yes, a lot of this was probably his own words, but you never know what's going on behind those closed doors. And he opened up a can of worms of what could be going on behind those closed doors. So, Mariners are in full damage control right now. I hope they get this figured out. I'm still going to watch the Mariners. I'm still a Mariners fan, so it doesn't matter what the ownership does. But it is frustrating, and I'm really hoping that they can get this right. Anyways, long video, guys. I hope you guys stuck all the way through it. If you did, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below on the situation. I really appreciate the support on the last couple videos. We hit 50 subscribers. Really happy about that. Keep supporting the channel. I'll keep bringing you Mariners content. And I'll see you guys next time. Mariners Fanatic, out.